Why should we have those tough conversations with our aging parents early? What does it matter how early we have those conversations? How does having the tough conversations with our aging parents early impact how you advocate for your parents? How are they interconnected? Let's talk about it. I want to break down each of those questions that I just asked in a couple of different ways. And I made some notes. So if you see me kind of glancing, it's just to keep me on track because I want to give you the information and I want to be respectful of your time. So we are talking about our aging parents and why we should have those tough conversations first. And I want you to remember, if you're listening to this and your parent is 36 or older, you have an aging parent. So you really should listen to this podcast because I feel like it could give the groundwork, it could lay the groundwork for you and your parents for the future. Hopefully, you'll never have to use any of these tips, but unfortunately, somewhere, someone right now is experiencing suddenly becoming a caregiver in whatever form that takes for that person, whether it's moving them in with them, they move in with their parent, they're in a facility, they're in assisted living, whatever that looks like. It's still caregiving, and if you are that person that's going to make sure, as best as possible within your power, that your parents are taken care of and their wishes are followed through on, then I think this is important information. So let's talk about why you should talk to your folks as early as possible about what their wishes are. And the number one reason that I've written down, this is my opinion, is just that. You know what they want. You know that your mom or your dad or both want A, B, C, and D, but not X, Y, and Z. And then that takes the worry and struggle out when you're thrust maybe suddenly in a situation. You're in crisis, emotions are high, everyone's up in arms, and you have no idea what your parents want, what your mom wants, what your dad wants. And now it's up to you or you and your siblings to make some tough decisions. And I will tell you, even if your parents do this, and I hope that they do for you, tell you what they want, still hard. Still hard. It's a hard journey, but it's less difficult for you as that adult child stepping in to make sure your parents' wishes are taken care of and they're met because you know that's what they wanted. And there's just something about that that can give you a little ease of knowing that's what mom wanted or that's what dad wanted. So that's one reason. You'll know what they want. I would recommend that you revisit that every maybe 3 or 4 years. So if you have that talk and your parents are in their 60s, every 2 to 3 years, have a conversation about it. Hey, you remember when we had that talk? Are you still okay with what you stated? Are we good? Do we need to revisit? And then I would say after you revisit it a couple of times and they're like, no, that's what I want, then that's what they want. And you don't have to worry about it anymore. And not that you're worried, but you always want to give them a chance to make a shift or a change, as they age. Maybe how they think about things change. Maybe something they wanted initially, they don't want now. So it's just nice to have an open dialogue. And I'm so grateful I had that conversation with my parents because the last 9 months of both of my parents, unfortunately, it was such a hard road for them, and I'm an only child, and it was a very difficult road for me as well, and I'm very close to my parents. So it's a hard road when you're a caregiver. I don't care what that means, in terms of how you define that word caregiver, like I was mentioning earlier. You don't have to live with them or they live with you for you to be their person, to be their advocate, the person that really cares about how they're taken care of. So don't think that. Don't let anyone belittle what you do for your parents because they have no idea until they have to do it themselves. I would also recommend when you do have these conversations with your parents, having it written down somewhere, but especially if you have siblings, maybe you have an attorney involved. There's something called advance directives, and, that just is what it sounds like. You do it in advance of there being a problem. And once you find out what your parents want, say, hey, why don't we have an attorney draw these papers up, and then it's in black and white. Here's what mom wants, here's what dad is wanting, and what they don't want. And that way, if you have siblings, there's not a issue. There's not going to be an issue when you finally do, unfortunately, find yourself in a situation that those papers have to be in place or implemented, right? So I just think that's very important, especially if there's more than two of you and maybe one or two of you live close, two or three live away. They come at Christmas, maybe they come once in the summer, so they're here once or twice a year. And the other couple of people are in the grind, taking them here, taking them there. And not that they don't want to do that, but you're more invested in terms of being in the daily with them. And it's just, I think, will help keep situations at bay if your parents have it in black and white. And then you really can't argue that. That's what they wanted. So that's what I think one of the biggest benefits is, that they know exactly, exactly what they want. Now, what are some of those tough conversations? What could that look like? Well, these are some of the things that I asked my parents. Do you want to be on life support? Do you want to be 80 years old and someone crushing on your chest, breaking all your ribs? Do you want to be resuscitated? They were like, no, I'm going to pass on that. So those are things to chat about. And these are not an end-all be-all list. It's just a few examples, so you kind of know what I'm talking about. Do you want a peg tube? Both of my parents said, no, I do not want a peg tube. I'm very grateful for that, because at the end, those last 9 months, I didn't have to make a decision for them. They had already made that decision for themselves. Doesn't make it easy, like I said, to watch, but it does make it easy in the sense that I didn't have to decide that. So I was very grateful for that. And I'll give you a quick example about the peg tube and why I think that's a real important conversation to have. I worked 20 years with adults in healthcare. My background's, I'm a speech language pathologist, so I worked a lot with CVA patients, stroke patients, TBIs, Parkinson's, you name it, people with swallowing disorders, definitely people with cognitive delays. And so I saw a lot of things, and people who are really impaired that get a peg tube can live for years on that peg tube. Now, if that's your choice, that's fine. I'm not saying that. But when something happens, I'll give you an example. I knew a lady from my hometown. She had a brain bleed. She lived alone. Her husband was deceased. She laid there, I want to say, for 36 hours. By the time they got to her, so much damage had been done. She couldn't walk, talk, she couldn't eat, and they gave her a peg tube. She lived for years after that. Gained a lot of weight. Yes, you can gain weight on a peg tube. And I just wonder sometimes if someone would have asked her pre-event, because you can't ask her. See, she could not be asked at that time. She was not able to say what I want or what I don't want. And that's why these tough conversations are so important to have initially with your parents, have them early on. If she would have had someone or had it written somewhere, I don't want this, then that wouldn't have happened. And who knows, maybe she had it that she did want one. But I know for my parents, that was a no-go, and they did not want to be in a bed for 10 years on a peg tube. So it's just uncomfortable things that we need to talk about early on, so later on, we don't have to be caught on our heels when we're in the middle of a crisis. So I hope that was helpful. Where do they want to live? That's another one. Where are you okay with going, and where are you not okay with going? So let's just give you an example. Let's say your parents, 65, they decide they don't want their house and they go to a retirement home. Beautiful retirement home. They're still fine. They're great. Physically fine, cognitively fit. Everything's great. And then something happens. Sometimes the retirement homes have assisted living units, which means you need a little help, but you're still overall independent. But you just need a little bit of help, assistance. And then some of them even have a memory care unit. So you could technically go in healthy and fine and move through the system within that building. You can live in your house. You could have home health. People can come in and give you therapy, whatever that may look like. OT, PT, speech, nursing, whatever you need can be brought to your house. I will tell you, a lot of elderly people do not like strangers in their house. So that is a conversation that you really need to be having, even as let's say they're 70 and they're fine. They're mentally, cognitively fit, physically fit. Hey, mom, dad, if you were to break your hip, are you okay with home health coming in, helping with bathing while you get back on your feet, blah, blah, blah. It's good to have those conversations so you know, yeah, they're not too keen on that. Well, what if I'm there when they come? Would that make it better? Just talk through it with them. Now, again, they could have home health. They could go to any of these places. They could go to assisted living. So they could move out of their house into assisted living if they're still independent enough to do most of their activities of daily living. Then there's obviously skilled nursing facilities when they can't be at home alone. They can't function in assisted living. They really need that 24-hour supervision. Then that is an option. So have those conversations. Where are you okay with? Where are you not okay with? And then you, as the advocate, will do your best to make sure that request is met. Sometimes things happen and you can't, in the very end, fulfill that commitment all the way. Don't beat yourself up. You're doing the best that you can do, and you have to protect your mental health. I can tell you, I did not protect my mental health. I did not think about Pam at all during my dad's situation, and especially during my mom's situation. Hers happened during 2020. You could just let your mind wander with that. It was a little extra heinous. So you have to think about yourself. So I hope if you don't gather anything else out of this, as an adult caregiver, please take care of yourself too. Because if you don't take care of you, then there's no one to watch out for them. However you watch out for them, you can't do it if you're not okay. And then I think you should also talk about, I mentioned the advanced directives. I think having a POA is also important. Power of attorney. I did not do that until my dad had broken his hip and had multiple things happen to him. He had some marbles out of his bag, if you know what I mean. Mentally was having some issues because of medication. He had been dropped at the second hospital that we went to, and he was just not set up for success. And I went to get their medication. We'll pick up their medication one day, and the pharmacist came to the window, and my dad was Army. He was a Korean war veteran. So they had TRICARE. And, pennies to the dollar what they pay for their medication. We were so grateful for that. And the pharmacist never came to the window. He came to the window and he said, Pam, this TRICARE's not paying for that. And I said, what? And so it was then I had to pay like $1,000 for like, I don't know, 2 weeks worth of medicine for one medication. And I'm thinking, okay, this is not going to work out well. So I go home and I talk to them, and now so Daddy is not able at that point to call them and say what is going on. My mom is not going to call them and find out. She wants me to call them. So of course I called them knowing they're not going to tell me anything. So it was at that moment I knew I need a POA. And so we did. They came in and I got power of attorney for Daddy. And then Mom, we need to do one for you too if something were to happen. So we did it for both. So don't wait. Do it up front as early as possible. Daddy wasn't completely off the blitz, but he did have a couple of marbles out. He did understand what we were doing and that I needed to have that to be able to get his medication situation straightened out because they wouldn't talk to me. And of course, once I got that, I was able to get it straightened out for them. So as much as we can be proactive and prevent things from happening, that's what we want to do because it's extreme. You're already in a stressful situation. They're already living with me. He is in shambles, basically. My mom's 5'2", little bitty thing. She really can't do anything to help him if he were to fall. It was tumultuous. And then now you bring in this money piece with the medication. And I'm like, okay, I'm trying to work. You get the picture. So please don't do that. Prepare as much as you can in advance. You're never going to be able to prepare for everything because things will happen that just like the medication. I could have had a POA, never crossed my mind. And I'm in healthcare, never crossed my mind. So I'm here to help you, hopefully, to think Okay, I don't want to be caught off guard like Pam with the medication and get behind the eight ball on that and take 2 or 3 weeks to get caught up. I want to be ahead of that and talk to my parents. So hopefully that'll help you guys. So extremely important, guys, to have those conversations early on. I know it's uncomfortable. Nobody that's 25 years old wants to talk to a 50-year-old parent about these things. You feel like, oh, that's morbid. I don't speak into that. It's not morbid, and you're not speaking into anything. It is being proactive. You love your parent. They love you. It's really taking care of each other. They're blessing you by answering these questions, and you're blessing to them by asking the questions, because it builds trust, commitment. They know, hey, Pam's going to take care of this if I'm in a situation that I can't do it for myself. And we'll talk in more detail as these podcasts continue in the future, but I just kind of want to give a little brief overview of why it really is important. And I want to speak to how it's tied to advocating. And why do we want to advocate for our parents? I wrote a couple of things down. Well, we want to ensure their quality of care, obviously, right? So if your parent ends up being, at the acute care, and then they go to rehab, and maybe they have to go to the nursing home for a short time, trying to get back home, always trying to get home. There's just these different levels. You have to know what their rights are and what your rights are, okay? Things change all the time. Laws are written all the time. Things are passed all the time, and we are clueless as a society, unfortunately. We don't know what our rights are, and that's scary. It's scary. I thought I knew a lot of the rules and regulations. They change all the time. They're rarely stagnant, and they're always shifting. And even if it's just a few words, it can change a lot of how they receive care, how long they can receive care, what that care looks like, and all those things. So if you're advocating, that there's so many levels to advocating, but you're definitely going to have to speak to that healthcare provider, the healthcare providers, whoever that is, the nurses, the therapists, if that's your OT, your PT, your speech, whomever. And you're definitely going to be speaking to doctors on occasion, right? Don't let anyone, and I'm saying this you do it with respectfully, and you do it standing in firmness that you are the advocate for your parent, because if you don't, nobody will. Do not get run over. Do not get rolled over. Do not let, just because it says doctor on the jacket, do not let that intimidate you. That's your mom, or that's your dad. Maybe it's your grandma or your grandpa, and you're the person responsible to make sure that everything is taken care of for them, and they're treated well. Just treat it humanely, okay? Just do what you're supposed to do, and let's not do anything that's going to pull us back in a negative. And sometimes, even when you do everything that you can do as an advocate for them, you've had the tough conversations, you've gotten the POA, you know what their advanced directives are. You're there almost 24/7 at the hospital or the rehab or wherever, the facility that they're in or at home. Things still happen, unfortunately. That's just life. Something's going to happen you're not expecting. Be ready. And that's not a negative. That's just, hey, be aware. In a crisis, things happen. Just when you think things are going along smoothly, bam, something is going to come out of the woodwork, and you're going to have to advocate for them. And I'll give you an example of when you advocate to the level that you think, I don't know what else I can do anymore, okay? You've done all the things that I mentioned previously, and you're showing up. You're there. They know you're coming. You're always there. Some different times, you're coming and going. You're calling, whatever. When my dad broke his hip, he had his surgery at, of course, the acute care facility. They did a great job. He came out from under the anesthesia, was doing great. Then they gave him a medication, and then it was like a switch flipped. And for lack of a better term, Daddy was nutty as a fruitcake. I couldn't believe the difference within like a 12-hour period. So when the nurses came in, I'm like, what's wrong with him? This is not how he was 6 hours ago. And, the doctor, everyone, they're looking at the chart, trying to figure out what changed. And it was this medication. And they were like, okay, he can't have this medication. So I think it was like another day or so, we were going to the rehab, for therapy because he had broken his hip. And, that's just the way it goes. Acute care, rehab, whatever your next step is. So I asked them, please put it in there. He's not to have this medication. And would you please write it down for me so that I can talk to them about, hey, he can't have this. Just a double layer of protection for him, right? So they do that. They put it in their notes, their orders, however they send it to the hospital. We go over there, and it's on a weekend. And I would say a day and a half. And he was almost back to himself, okay? Like 6'4", probably weighed 168 pounds, soaking wet, but he was putting those marbles back in the bag. He was becoming more like daddy. And so the day we checked in, I know these people because I worked there for almost 12 years. And I'm like, hey, listen, he can't have this medication. I need you to write that in the orders. And I stood right there. I watched her write in big letters on the page that you put orders on, do not give this medication. I watched them write it in the chart. And when I left that night, I said, I thank them, and appreciate what you're doing for Dad. Just make sure he doesn't get that medication and don't drop him for whatever you do. Well, guess what? They gave him 2 doses of the medication and they dropped him that night. Ruined his rehab. I blame that moment really on Daddy never, ever getting back where he could have gotten had he been able to stay cognitively fit. So they just gave him a double whammy. And what else could I have done other than administer or not administer the medication myself, or been there at night, which they didn't allow, to take him to the bathroom. So just know, okay, just know. You can literally do everything and above for them as an advocate, and something can still happen. Something can still go wrong. But don't let that discourage you. Do, right? Do everything that you can for them, because when it's all over and it's all said and done, I have no regrets. I did all that I could do for my parents. I truly don't know what else I could have done. And so that I can sleep at night because I did all I could do. And I just want to help you and us as a community to know you're not alone. Here's information that hopefully will benefit you in the future. I hope you never have to use any of it, but you'll know about it. And that I want this to be an educational type program where we can come together and talk, and different people come on and share things of how we can do preventative things and be proactive and keep things from happening, and things that we could do as they're happening at the end and on the other side. I just want this to be a community where we care about each other, we have empathy for one another, and that we can feel safe here and come together and know that we're not going to be ridiculed or made fun of in any way. Because as I said before, whatever you do, and you do with a pure heart for your parents, you're doing all you can, and you're doing all you can do, then you're doing all you can do. You're doing 100%. Way to go. I'm proud of you. So to be on the top of your game, guys, you have to know your rights and you have to know their rights. And you have to stay on top of it because, like I said, things do change. And then when you're in a crisis, so like 2020, when we couldn't go see people, there were things in place that would have allowed me in, but I found out too late about that. Don't tell me too late. Tell me in the beginning. Okay, tell me in the beginning. If we get in a certain situation, then I'm still allowed in because I'm impacting that person's ability to function, to live, to eat. So know your rights. It's unfortunate that we have to do the digging ourselves because people in certain situations, they just aren't open. They're just not open to tell you. Maybe they don't want you to know. Maybe they think, well, if it's out there, let her find out for herself. So not to be a Debbie Downer over here, but I'm just telling you, it's all for one and one for all, okay? In not reality. It's you and your parents, and not against the healthcare system, but you have to always know, yes, we need some help from acute care or from rehab or from, a skill facility, or we need some home health or whatever. It's a team effort. It's a team effort. But you are the one that really truly cares about those people. They're your mom and dad. And so that falls on us to make sure that these people who are paid to take care of them, whatever that means, they are doing what they can do to the best of their ability. They don't, not to harm our parents. That's all I'm saying. Don't give dad the medicine. Don't drop him. How hard is that? It's not hard at all, but they did it anyway. Double dose and a drop. So don't beat yourself up, but be prepared, okay? Know your rights, know their rights. Have those tough conversations ahead of the game, and it will set you up for success. Even as you ride the roller coaster, it's kind of like, it's you'll have ups and downs, but at least you'll be as prepared as possible for something that is coming. You won't be completely caught off guard. So, guys, I hope this was beneficial. I hope you got something out of this. Drop a comment if you're a caregiver. Let me know. If you're an only child or if you have siblings, what's your situation look like? We'd love to hear about it. And just try to enjoy the journey. And we will see you in the next one.